For USCFootball.com, I'm Keely Eure here with Shotgun Spratling for instant analysis of USC's Wednesday press conference. It was a defensive day, Shotgun. We got to talk to Todd Orlando, USC's defensive coordinator, Drake Jackson, and Ralen Goforth. Starting off with Orlando, we wanted to know his assessment of his defense. We've now seen 2 weeks of it, so we specifically asked, what have you seen from week 1 to week 2, and what did he see, Shotgun?
One of the things that he noticed is, they're more physical. He felt that he was positive on the response that they had overall going from week 1 to week 2. He said they starting to play faster, starting to play with more physicality. He thought they were a little too uptight in game 1, and he thinks that they're progressively going to gain confidence. He said they're continually learning how they want to do things as an organization, as a team, and I think that's something that it only kind of comes with a little bit of experience. So I think he's correct in those things he's talking about. I know there's some things that he definitely still wants to clean up as well, including, their angles for the linebackers, how they're reading, reacting to some things and the speed that they're having there. So there's still some things that they definitely have to fix, but I think he's feeling more confident with where the group is after the week 1 to week 2 jump that they took. And the fact that, they were able to correct a lot of different things that were missteps in that first week, some different angles, some leverage in situations. I think that they were positive growth areas, and he noted those, and I think that he feels like they'll continue to get better as the season goes along.
Yeah, and you specifically asked about losing a couple key players during the game and how that affects the performance. What do you have to say as far as the overall evaluation of week 2 when you take into account the injuries that occurred as well?
Yeah, he said it was interesting the way he kind of phrased it. He said he turned around and, Palia and Itiote's out. And he turned around, Drake Jackson's on the exercise bike. He turned around and he's like, where's Tally at? Where's Tally? Being Talanoa Hufanga said he was somewhere else. So, that's your 3 best players at 3 different levels. So he said it was really cool that they were able to throw in some guys, and guys stepped up. It wasn't like there was a glaring issue, a glaring hole when one of those guys left the game. So he was really confident and happy to see that those guys came in, and the practice habits is where he says that comes from. He said if you're not getting done in practice, you're not going to get thrown into that situation. But he was really excited about a guy like Raymond Scott. Said he got 47 plays for someone who hasn't, moved back to the linebacker position, hadn't played linebacker in college. So he said that comes from getting the work done behind the scenes. What are you doing in practice? He said it was a little bit of a scramble as far as their personnel groupings for some different things, but they figured it out, made it work. And he talked a little bit about the adjustments they made in the second half. I asked him about that as well. He said that was one of the things. Raymond Scott was used as a spy in the second half. He said that was something they initially didn't think they would need. But then when Grant Gunnell was picking up some third downs, they said, hey, this is something we're going to have to use. And they went to Raymond Scott and said, hey, let's use you as a spy. And they did some different things. So I think it was interesting how they made adjustments in game, and they had to do it with some backups. And the backups were there to make some plays for them in the game. And, he was happy with that the work they had done in practice showed up on game day.
Now, another guy who's had to step up, not necessarily in week 2, but preseason into the season, was Ralen Goforth. And we got to talk to him about how he's adjusting to a starting role, given the fact that he hadn't played many snaps prior to this season. What do you have to say, Shotgun?
He's pretty forthcoming and said that he wasn't happy when he was self-assessing himself the first couple weeks. He wasn't happy with his angles, and especially game 1, he wasn't happy with the way he shock and shed is the way he phrased it. Getting on that offensive lineman and then get him out of the way to go try to make a play. And he said, I try to be my own worst critic. I grade myself pretty hard each and every week. And Orlando kind of followed up on that and said, that's what we want out of players. We want guys that, are not happy. We're not in this business to be average. We want to be great is how he phrased it. So I think that he's happy with the moves going forward that Raylen has made. Raylen obviously has to play better. He's not played great in the first 2 games, but I think that he's a guy that's going to only get better with experience. He's one of those young guys that I see, we saw last year at the beginning of camp to end of camp, made some big jumps. I think the experience he's got in the first couple of weeks is really going to help him, and they're going to need him because Palia and Itiote still question mark going into the game. Yeah. Raylen has to step forward if EA's not ready to go. Is it going to be Raylen and Raymond Scott out there, Ray and Ray? It was interesting with Todd Orlando because he calls them both Ray. Yeah. He'll call it short for Raylen or Raymond. So one time when he's talking about Raymond Scott, he's like Ray Scott and had to point it out because he calls both of those guys. But, Raylen Goforth says he feels like he's fitting in pretty good, but he says football's football. He's grasping the concepts and stuff, but he's got to do better. And he was being a critic on himself and said, one of the things he's got to do is continue to watch more film. And I thought it was interesting. He said the football gods are going to pay off. You get out of it what you put in. So he's watching extra film to try to make sure that he's ready and prepared for the upcoming game with Utah.
Mm-hmm. You started that with Goforth was forthcoming, so well done, Shotgun. A tongue twister there. Now, when it comes to preparing for Utah, it's another team that will begin their season against USC. Orlando said that they're preparing for all three quarterbacks, if that's a possibility. He also said he's leaning on Craig Naivar, which I thought was interesting. Why is that, Shotgun?
Because Craig Naivar has experience as a defensive coordinator against Utah in Utah's last game. Because when Orlando was fired from Texas, Naivar, who was there with him as a secondary coach, took over as the defensive coordinator for the bowl game prep when Texas played Utah. So he said he's really leaning on Naivar because one of the differences with bowl prep is you're not getting 2 days of prep like you would a normal week leading into a game during the season. You have 8 to 10 days to really look at the schemes, really look at the players they have. Now, obviously, Utah has a lot of different players. No Zach Moss, no Tyler Huntley are the biggest two, but they returned four offensive linemen that have starting experience. They have, some receivers that they've seen before. So they'll be able to have a little bit more prep there and know the scheme a lot better. So they're going to be preparing for all three quarterbacks. And Orlando said that's something you always have to do in a first game, which this being for Utah, you have to get an idea of what they've done in the past off tape from high school or, previous stops. But you got to have an idea because you never know, what may happen. Even if there's an injury, you want to be able to, have that prep and know what a guy is good at and how to try to attack it. So he's leaning on Naivar. Naivar's his guy, obviously coming over from Texas with him, but he's really turning to him and saying, hey, you've seen this team a lot more than I have. Where do we need to attack this team? And that's what you need from your staff. You need to be able to rely on the guys around you, and especially if it's the guy that you brought with you from Texas.
Yeah. Now, another guy USC will be leaning on and has leaned on this season so far is Marlon Tuihalamaka. Orlando made sure to say that he will be needed against Utah since they want to run the ball up the middle. And, Shotgun, you specifically asked, this is a tough workload for Marlon Tuihalamaka. I know we've talked about it a lot on Instant. Orlando sounded very cognizant of the fact that they know his snap count and they're trying to make sure that they don't overwork him.
Yeah, I was looking through, and Marlon Tuihalamaka has actually been, had a career high snaps in the first game, and then he's reset it the second game. So, he's being used a ton, and they're going to need him to be, the rock in the middle of the defensive line this week against Utah because they like to run power stuff with their running attack, but they also like to go tempo at times, and they like to, push the tempo. So they said they're being very cognizant of his usage, Marlon Tuihalamaka's, and Orlando said, I've got the rep count right here in front of me on my desk, but it's not just the rep count from the game. He's also looking at the reps he's getting in practice. They're being really cognizant of what he's doing in practice to make sure they keep him fresh because we have seen Marlon kind of, wane a little bit in the second half of the last 2 years. Now, obviously, shorter season, and Orlando pointed that out. He said, we'd probably be treating it a little bit differently if this is week 11 of a full season rather than week 11 of an abbreviated season and just week 2 for USC. But Marlon has been so big in the middle of that defensive line. He's been, the guy that is changing everything for the guys behind him. Raylen Goforth talked about that, said, when you got some of those vets in front of you, it makes your job a lot simpler because they keep the offensive lineman off of him. If you've got to double team Marlon and enable someone else to come free. So Drake Jackson, Nick Figueroa, the linebackers behind him, all those guys are going to benefit from the way Marlon Tuihalamaka is playing. And if he continues to play at the high level he's playing at, then that's really huge for this USC defense.
Mm-hmm. There's been some talk about Chris Steele's pass interference penalties, and Todd Orlando was asked about it today, but he aired on the side of you don't want to overcoach, you don't want to make a guy too soft in that sense, Shotgun. It sounded like he tried to compare it to a strike zone. If you know where the umpires are calling that day, you try and adjust your game to that.
Yeah, and Chris Steele has been in good position on all the calls. He's not like he's, reaching out and tackling a guy that's burning him on a play. He's right there. He's just being too handsy. He said they'll make some adjustments. But Orlando said he still wants him to be aggressive. You want your guys to be aggressive, especially at the cornerback position. He said if you get too much into a corner's heads, you make them soft, you'll never get the same results from them, basically. They'll never be the same player. So they want to be consistent. They want to get things cleaned up. He says just a couple of technique things, but he feels really confident with the way that Steele's playing and is out there on that island. And that's the thing. he and Elijah Griffin are both basically on islands for most of the game, and both of them have stepped up. They haven't given up many catches. Now you just got to take the hands away from Chris Steele a little bit. Maybe you put him in the boxing gloves like we've seen in the past with DB coaches. Maybe you tie his hands behind his back if you need to get him just to practice because he's in great position. Now just don't grab. And I think that, if he takes that step, his game is only going to continue to improve by leaps and bounds. He's only a sophomore. People forget that. Yeah. People talked about Iman Marshall at the beginning of his career, Adoree Jackson at the beginning of his career. Young cornerbacks are going to be tested. Teams look out there and they see a freshman or a sophomore and say, let's attack that guy. Now, can you make adjustments? Do you continue to get better and better as your career progresses? And I think Chris Steele is going to be one of the guys that does that.
Mm-hmm. As far as Drake Jackson goes, we didn't hear too much from him today. He did say that his role hasn't changed too much in Todd Orlando's defense. He said he feels freer. He likes that he can just play in that sense. Shotgun, what have you seen from Jackson over the last 2 weeks?
Yeah, another young guy, just a sophomore as well. He said his role hasn't changed. He's still rushing the passer. The one thing he did say that he did a little bit of work in the offseason on is he's dropping the coverage a little bit more now. Now, how much is he dropping into coverage? I know a lot of people were concerned about that coming into the season. Why are they putting him at outside linebacker? He's their next great pass rusher. It's been like 4 snaps a game. And that's because you're using some zone pressures and you're bringing a cornerback blitz from the opposite side and dropping out Drake Jackson, things like that. And I think that the fact that he's so athletic and, if you can trick a quarterback into thinking that he has an open window and suddenly Drake Jackson's there, he's going to end up making a significant play where he either bats a ball or he catches a tip pass. He's got great hands as well. He's going to do something special out there. So it's not like he's doing a lot different. He's basically rushing the passer almost every snap. But he said the one thing about playing for Orlando right now is they're just having him play free. He doesn't have to think as much. Even though he's doing the drops and coverage, he doesn't have too many responsibilities. Most of the time it's just, hey, go get the quarterback. And so far, a couple of times he got sacks in the Arizona game. He said he was close to getting some other ones in the Arizona State game. He said there wasn't much different. It's just Jaden Daniels was doing a good job of getting rid of the ball a little bit quicker than Arizona's quarterback did.
Mm-hmm. Alrighty, that's going to wrap it up for Wednesday's press conference. We'll be back tomorrow for Thursday's press conference with Clay Hilton. I'm sure we'll get a better sense of the injury picture there. But for Shotgun Spratling, I'm Keely Eure. For more, check out uscfootball.com.